If you grew up playing games in the 2000s like I did, it's no doubt that Flash games were a definitive aspect of that experience. I probably played more games on Newgrounds than I did on Steam as a kid. Not to mention, for the first time, indie game developers had a direct connection to a gaming audience while skirting the route of in-person game stores by submitting their game to the first of its kind automated Flash portal developed in the year 2000. 6 years later, the platformer that would define Newgrounds for years to come hit the website. The Fancy Pants Adventures. While you might recognize this title, there was another little 2D platformer that came out that very same year, which you may have heard of, the new Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo DS. Yes, the behemoth that is the Super Mario franchise has had an impact on game culture from far before then, but for me and many other 2000s kids, this was our first opportunity to sink our teeth into the addictive platformer, and on our first portable console no less. Unknown to me in 2006, these two platformers would become a staple of my gaming life up until I became a teenager. But why, you might ask, with access to the iconic Nintendo title of the new Super Mario Bros. Would some Newgrounds Flash game have any place in my gaming experience? Well, some of you might have heard of a little thing called school. A place famously unimpressed with distracted students. And at a time when mobile phones were still not a staple of the school student experience, you can imagine teachers would, at best, have that Nintendo DS confiscated. And God forbid they had the bright idea to inform your parents. So, no. Unfortunately, school's a time devoid of gameplay for me. Or it would have been, if not for some school board member having the bright idea of introducing the subject of computers. Well, yes, a good idea in theory to get kids accustomed to the world of modern technology early on, you can bet your ass we were going to be playing games in that 30 to 60 minute period. Recounting stories like this always makes me think how unique it was growing up at a time when personal computer technology was on an exponentially growing curve. Anyway, not too long after we kids got comfortable with bypassing website restrictions the IT team put in place, a name started being passed around the class. Unfamiliar with the title, of course, I expected to open up yet another arbitrary Flash game I'd have the fun experience of getting used to. However, entering the first world of the Fancy Pants Adventures, I wasn't as unfamiliar with it as I thought I'd be. A 2D side-scroller that included jumping on small round enemies to kill them. You can bet that was familiar. But the more I played Fancy Pants and the more I look back on the game retrospectively today, I realized that while what got me into it was its surface level similarity to the Super Mario games, what makes it such an iconic Flash game today is the obvious love and creativity poured into it from the developer, Borne. As I take you through these 3 worlds of the Fancy Pants Adventures that have been released since 2006, you'll hopefully agree with the sentiment. To fully immerse myself in the retrospective nature of this video, I booted up the Fancy Pants Adventures for the first time in roughly a decade. For World 1, I thought I would play the game as my younger self did, on a random website hosting the game for free. Entering the door of the first Fancy Pants world, its age as a mid-2000s Flash game was really showing, but the slight delay between keyboard movement and the rough edges around Fancy Pants Man, yes, that's his actual name, turned out to be more endearing and nostalgic than irritating. For the remaining 2 worlds, I had to turn to installing the Classic Pack version of the game on Steam, which remastered all 3 worlds with far improved movement. But I wanted to start my replaying of this game as similar as I could to how I first played it. The sound effects of taking damage and jumping on spiders struck a nostalgic chord with my ears, and not to mention encountering my first Monsters Inc. 4D door that teleports you to another part of the map. There was also a very obvious ode to the Mario Bros. Games in the form of a head-butting, score-increasing floating block. A little bit later, I encountered a secret cardboard box, which was my first reminder of how creatively erratic Borne can be as a developer. He included a minigame in this hidden corner of World 1, which rewarded you with a wall-jumping ability on completion. It took a frustrating amount of attempts to beat this minigame, especially considering that it only actually helps with parkour in Worlds 2 and 3. Borne just included it as a reward for players that backtrack to find the secret box. Eventually, I hopped out of the minigame world with a completely useless ability under my belt and made my way through the cold blue landscape of World 1, encountering another minigame that involved spring-locked jumping. After beating minigames or finding particularly hidden areas, you're rewarded with these weird action figures that I couldn't find any use for. They're also jarringly different from the art style of the game, an aspect of Flash games that was common in the genesis of Newgrounds. Just weird features for the sake of being weird. After a few more Monsters Inc. doors, the scenery finally changed to including a bit more greenery. I smashed spiders and collected spirals through this lovely brief meadow until I arrived at World 1's end, the Angry Penguin Hole. On replaying this game like 10 years later now, I find it hilarious that the whole premise for the World 1 boss fight is just that you voluntarily woke up a sleeping penguin that you were warned was angry and then fought him to the death. Figuring out the mechanics of how to do that was pretty fun, and the death screen saying that you killed Fancy Pants Man instead of just the usual you died screen was hilarious, but eventually after you figure out its gimmick, the penguin fight gets old pretty quickly. Luckily, it only takes a couple hits to get defeated once you understand the mechanic. Moving on to the remastered Steam version of the game for World 2, I got to experience much smoother gameplay. In this world, I could really feel the momentum as I moved, sped up, and had to account for the time taken to slow down. Not to mention the animation was a lot smoother. Instead of going with the classic kill a random animal plotline of World 1, Borne had the genius idea of having an angry rabbit steal the ice cream you won in snail shell golf. Yes, I'm aware of how weird I sound right now. Even Borne had to admit through the mayor of Squiggleville that he did this just to give the second world some plot motivation. After entering the classic underground level most 2D platformers had back then, I sped and jumped my way up to the next Monsters Inc. door and transported into the next section of the world where I got hit with a wave of nostalgia over the level that introduced slippery oil on the ground I used to enjoy so much as a kid. I noticed that with this smooth animation boost and improved control recognition, I wasn't dying anywhere near as much as I was during my time in World 1 on an OG Flash website. As I moved onto a forest level, I noticed a lot of funny details embedded into the background, such as spiders piloting hot air balloons, with one even piloting a cow. I feel like Borne's whatever the fuck attitude toward the design really made the whole experience of the game feel all childlike and light. I made my way up through the Jack and the Beanstalk level and into another underground one, where I uncovered some hidden features, such as invisible gaps in the wall you could walk through. Seeing the honestly incredibly aged and rather unfunny bat spider joke in the background was enjoyable for showing the game's age, if nothing else. As Fancy Pants Man defied gravity with his sprint up the wall, Borne encouraged me with giant signs that read "Run fast, run fancy." I then moved on to this world's final level, which caused me a fair amount of grief as I was dying pretty frequently to messing up the hanging chain mechanic and falling out of the world. This level also pushed my ability to wall jump to its limit, which was especially embarrassing considering I had technically had the ability since World 1. Finally though, I made my way to the doorway leading to the angry rabbit. Feeling like I had a bit more of a reason to fight this guy as opposed to the sleeping penguin from World 1, I tried my best to figure out what his gimmick would be as quick as possible. It didn't look like jumping on him did anything, nor did it look like he was going to be sprinting into the wall anytime soon. Eventually some enemies fell down from the sky, and there I discovered the gimmick of kicking a snail shell into the rabbit to stun him. But make no mistake, that didn't make the rest of the fight boring like it did with the angry penguin. Side note, apparently I say penguin weirdly. I think I say it normal, I don't know. You tell me. Can I get a consensus on this? Do I say penguin weird? It took a stupid amount of attempts to kill him, having to even restart the level multiple times because of losing all my lives. Side note, I love how Fancy Pants Man falls asleep when you're AFK for a while. After one of these level resets, I discovered a hidden ice level in which I collected enough swirly points to earn myself another life. Armed with 4 lives this time, I finally defeated the rabbit and reclaimed my ice cream. I found World 2 to be the fleshed out experience of Fancy Pants that I remember playing the most. And World 3, well, that turned out to be an entirely new experience for me. Opening the door into World 3, I was surprised to find that I never played this world as a kid. Here was the mayor of Squiggleville spying on me while I slept. What? Really? Okay. Sure, that's how it starts. And I definitely would have remembered an entire other world to spend my time playing in computers, but nope. I guess none of the Flash sites I played on had World 3, or I just never made it that far somehow. Regardless, embarking on this new experience, I was excited to see what the latest and remastered world of the Fancy Pants Adventures had to offer. Running through the cityscapes of Squiggleville that had previously been mentioned but never shown, I noticed improved sound effects that were very much a homage to the original ones, and added features such as health bars on enemies. This world's plotline proved to be even stranger than the first two, if you could even say World 1 had a plotline, as my goal was to retrieve the commandeered giant bathtub of the king, which was stolen by angry pirates. Yeah, but the weirdness doesn't stop there. After swimming down to the bottom of the bathtub and saving it from the pirates with the swimming feature Borne added into the game, the plot takes a turn as a little girl kicked the pirate captain in the balls. What was Borne on? Holy shit. And then all the other pirates decide that they should make her the new captain. Oh, and also she's your little sister. So now you're kind of rescuing her, I guess. During cutscenes like this, it was clear that between Worlds 2 and 3, the game had their animation budget increased, and it was definitely in stark contrast to World 1. After making it through more cityscapes and a spike level, I found a message in a bottle deep in a forest. With another meta joke from Borne referencing the absurdity of the plotline, I carried on my search for Fancy Pants Man's little sister. I then encountered Fancy Pants' first sand-based level. Usually platformers stereotypically have a desert-themed level included, but Borne decided to go with a beach-themed level instead. This level had a few interesting and exclusive features, such as timed platforms that would disintegrate if you spent too long on them. This led me onto an underwater section which revealed a pirate ship hull. Perfect. But just as I was hoping to find Fancy Pants' little sister, I instead encountered a wall of enemies which, keeping in the meta theme of Borne's writing, mentioned that they were invincible to me as I couldn't bounce on their heads to deal damage. They also accidentally told me that there was a weapon I needed to find and how to leave the ship to go find it. No one else does in-game tips like Brad Borne. I was really interested in what this weapon could be, and as I dived into the water below the ship to search for such a thing, I found my way into into a dank sewer system, which eventually led me to a room where a disembodied voice, presumably Brad Borne himself, talking about trying to find his missing pencil. I then Indiana Jones the shit out of that podium and got told by the disembodied Borne to at least bring the pencil back when I'm done so that he could finish World 4. What a cute way to include an interaction with the developer. It reminds me of the meta way Toby Fox did his plot and character writing for Undertale. On returning to the pile of pirate enemies, I whipped out a new ability, the pencil sword. After I effortlessly sliced through their blockade, I found the door behind which the Fancy Pants Man's sister was, okay, I'm just gonna say my sister from now on to not have to say that every time, behind which my sister was being kept. But first, I had to find these 3 keys to unlock it. I fought spiders and parrots to get the first one, clashed swords, or pencil and sword I guess, with buff pirates for the second, and finally, battled some miniature ninjas for the final key. Honestly, I never expected Fancy Pants of all games to give me one of my favorite 2D sword or pencil, I guess, fighting experiences ever. The pencil attack button combined with the jump button and 4 movement keys all produced unique pencil attacks, as well as a charge up move too. It took a bit of getting used to, but man did I enjoy swinging that pencil around. And the mini ninjas made for awesome choreography in the fight. Running back to my sister's locked door with all the keys in hand, I opened it up and ran to where she was being kept, only to discover, plot twist, she enjoys ruling the pirates. She then plummeted me from her floating chair apparently, into the underground where her old pirate captain was being kept. He says the reason that he lost the respect of his crew is because he has a colorful beard and that he needs something more manly. The woke mob gonna be on his ass soon, on God. Anyway, in another surprising direction for the story, I had to go find him some beard dye so that he could reclaim his title as captain from my little sister. After getting cannon shot out of the underground into a forest, I discovered an ancient temple, at the heart of which was the infamous manly beard dye. It then proceeded to teleport me back to the heart of the pirate base, as all manly beard dye does, and I had to fight my way through dozens of ninjas, taking refuge in a mysterious door I found in the middle of the fight. Honestly, I'd rather fight the ninjas than engage with whatever that vibe was. On returning to my little sister's throne room once again, I had to fend off ninjas at first, and then the old captain himself, claiming to be Captain Manly Beard. I had to smack that red-pilled mindset out of him in the final Fancy Pants boss fight, which I must proudly say that I only had to attempt once. To be fair, he had the easiest gimmick to work with of all the bosses. He gets stunned by his own attack. In a heartwarming final scene, Fancy Pants Man extends out a hand to his little sister, and together they return home. Waking up in my bed once again, I couldn't help but think that the reason there's no World 4 today is because Fancy Pants Man completely forgot to return the pencil. I also noticed that there were a few different colors I could change my pants to, but after looking at a few, it just didn't sit right with me visually. The Fancy Pants Adventures is a platformer that stepped out of the shadow of its spiritual predecessor, a game that shines with creative and unique features, an experience that I'll remember as a core aspect of my time growing up in the 2000s and 2010s, and the orange color of Fancy Pants Man's iconic outfit will always be a representation of that.